Ladies, gentlemen, distinguished dignitaries, Bolton citizens, I'd like to welcome you to this 21st anniversary of 9/11 commemorative ceremony. The event is possible because of the support of the town's selectmen and the Bolton school system. Participants to this event include the Scouts led by Anthony Girasoli and Amy Slater, Ambulance Service of Manchester EMTs Casey Farrell and Ryan Schreiner, choir students from Bolton High School led by Dan Ayer, and band members led by Catherine DeRosa. Since this is Katie's last time participating, as she will be leaving BHS soon to take a job as an assistant principal in Stafford, I'm requesting that she and Chief Dixon come forward so that the Chief can present her an award for her many years of service to the program.
We can't call her a band leader anymore. This is Assistant Vice Principal. Very nice. Katie's been very instrumental in putting this program on for the community for years here. She's had about a week along with Dan to get all the students back in the classroom and have them re-educate on how to do some of these songs. And the way they've taught them in the past, it wasn't tough to do. Katie, we'd like to present you something today. Bolton Fire Department 9/11 Commencement Event Award to Catherine DeRosa in appreciation of your leadership and your dedicated community service, September 11, 2022.
The Bolton Fire Department provides 24/7, 365 days service to the town. The primary payroll for the 40-plus person department for the entire year was $18,811, or about $2 for every hour served. Last year, the fire department responded to 476 calls for aid, including 362 medical emergencies, 10 fire calls, 40 service calls, and 27 hazardous materials events. Training for the members is weekly, with many taking weekend and evening courses for advanced certifications in firefighting and medical skills. On behalf of a grateful community, today we want to thank the police, the fire, the ambulance, and all the other public service workers for their dedicated and outstanding community service, and we pledge to always support your mission. Thank you for a job well done. We are fortunate to have prominent leaders here with us to help commemorate 9/11 and the meaning that this day has come to represent. For the past 21 years in Bolton, we have kept the faith and honored all those innocent people and emergency responders killed that day by enemies who still seek to destroy our nation. By recognizing the value of their lives, we endeavor to ensure that they have not died in vain. I would like everyone that can to please rise so that Scouts Margaret Slater and Scout Philip Skudlarek can come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
Please, those who have Scout uniform on, salute on your forehead, but those who do not have Scout uniform and are in normal clothes, hand over heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you. Please be seated. Our first speaker is Father Christopher Rose of St. George's Episcopal Church in Bolton. Chris went to UConn and has graduate degrees from the General Theological Seminary and the College of Preachers at the Washington National Cathedral. He has served in parishes in Connecticut for over 24 years. He is known for his advocacy of the poor, the hungry, the homeless, and for the well-being of children. He has also been employed in the mental health field. For many years, he's had a popular radio show on WJMJ, and he's also been very active for many years in CHRO. Father Rose, would you please come forward and offer us some words of faith regarding the events of 9/11?
Good afternoon, or good morning, is it what who knows? I don't know how many of you watched Channel 3 this morning. Anybody watch Channel 3 News first thing, or you were still in bed? Okay. One of the top news stories was told about a special memorial to a volunteer firefighter from the town of Avon, a young man who happened to be in New York City 21 years ago on this day. When he heard reports of the first plane crashing into the tower, he immediately leapt into action. He searched for a place to park his car. And of course, in those days, on a workday, New York Lower Manhattan is it's nearly impossible. So he had to park 2.5 miles away from the Twin Towers. And he immediately got out, went into the trunk of his car, and of course, being a volunteer fireman, like you folks, he had his full fire gear. He put it on, everything, and how much does that weigh? A lot. He ran 2.5 miles from there all the way to the Twin Towers, and he helped several people. He carried some of the people out who were injured. He helped several people escape from the Twin Towers, and then the final time he went in, he never came out. And he passed away as the tower collapsed on him. So the Avon Volunteer Fire Department came up with this reenactment, and the whole department jogged 2.5 miles from there to their firehouse this morning in memory of their friend. That is the heroism of first responders. They put others first, not counting their own safety. So many lives were saved that day because of them, and so many people today are alive because of them. You know, it's a miracle, if you stop and think about it, that only 3,000 people died that day. Because if you're familiar with the Twin Towers, there were more than 20,000 people working in those buildings. And most of them, 17,000 of them, got out more or less safely. It was the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. We had been safe on American soil till then, of course not counting the War of 1812. I don't know if anybody remembers that. When we were attacked by our friends, the British. Back then, the U.S. Capitol was burned to the ground, and much of New York City was also burned. But not since that time had we feared an attack on our own soil. We were in a safe cocoon on the mainland, even during World War II. It seemed as though we had nothing to fear as we went about our business. I don't know about you, but that is pretty much the way I led my life up until 9/11. 9/11 changed all of that. It changed our lives. It changed mine profoundly. It was such a powerful moment that if we were old enough, we can recall where we were when it happened in a crystal clear way. The memories come into sharp focus for us when we remember the event. I, for one, was worried that a dear friend of mine who worked at Ground Zero had been killed in the event. And I didn't know for most of that day whether they had survived. But thankfully, later that evening, I found out that they were okay and got in touch with them over the phone. What a sigh of relief, but tempered by the knowledge of all our fellow Connecticut neighbors, and let's make that local, who were grieving the loss of family members and friends. So what's the spiritual import of this moment in our history? Well, it shook the foundations of our assumptions about reality, and about life. And the uncertainty with which we've lived for days and weeks after that event, it was something that if you lived through it, you can remember, but it's indescribable. We still thought we might be attacked. We no longer could feel safe since then, since pretty much, increasingly, we've had mass shootings, violence in our schools, pandemics, and of course the impending climate change, just to name a few. What has changed is that we are sorely aware, unless we stick our heads in the sand, of the shortness and uncertainty of life and how it can change in just a few moments. And this was what made this so different. I mean, we've all lost someone special and dear to us, a classmate, a relative, but this was a community experience. It embraced all of us. And this casts a shadow, the shadow of those two towers on our lives, and what we count as real priorities by the way we live. And those priorities, which are often eclipsed by our busy lives and our self-chosen busyness, are simply summed up in one word. That priority is love. Love God. That is, if you're religious and a believer. But even if you aren't, love your neighbor, and you can't do that unless you love yourself. Remember the summary of the law? Love your neighbor as yourself. So there are really 3 commandments there. We're called to be lovers, not busybodies. And I'm not talking about gossips. I'm talking what most of us are, including me, busybodies. When the end of our short stay on this earth comes, no one worries or regrets not having spent more time in the office or at work. Believe me, and I've been with hundreds of people in their last minutes. What we will regret is if we weren't and haven't been lovers, the lovers that we were called and meant to be in this life. Have we loved our families, our children, our spouses, our friends, our neighbors, and our co-workers? Have we loved the poor and those who are troubled, who live in our midst? When was the last time you said the L word to someone? It's kind of scary to say that, isn't it? Maybe you say it to your spouse, but it's rote. Say it as though you mean it. Say it as though you mean it to your kids. And try saying it to some strangers. My life was changed forever after 9/11, and I wouldn't want it to go back. It was an awful time to live through, but I'm the better for it. I changed the priorities of my life in a painfully and slow process thereafter. And hopefully, 9/11 reminds us of those priorities and the imperatives to be lovers. Thank you.
Our next speaker is First Selectman Pamela Sawyer. Pam has a long history of public service in Bolton since she moved here in 1978 with her husband Rick and 2 daughters. She began her career as a science teacher for 7 years, served on the Board of Education for 12 years, and then ran for and won the seat for the General Assembly and served 22 years in the legislature. After that, she worked 5 years with Access Health, and this fall was elected as Bolton's first selectman. As a side note, she's also been a Justice of the Peace since 1985 and has officiated at 128 weddings. Pam, would you please come forward and offer us your thoughts about 9/11 and the importance of commemorating this day?
Yes, we remember 21 years later. But the question is, do we continue this remembrance each year on this day? It was a beautiful day that dawned, one of daily activities for each and every American. We got up, we made breakfast, we sent the children off to school. Americans talk so often about where we were that day. I look over at you students to remember. At Bolton High School, kids had arrived, settled in for a regular school day. The sun was shining, and first period had started. And then something very strange happened. Mr. Fleming, who was the principal at the time, came over the PA system. It should have been about something about a sporting event or some other activity that was important to some. But what he said was the most unsettling, unusual thing. His message was about the plane hitting the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, which we would come to know as the plane that hit the North Tower. And the day began to unravel like no other. As the next period started, one student, whose father was a pilot who flew daily to New York City, was asked to be excused, and after the bathroom break, quietly walked not back to class, but to where she knew there was a TV, to the library. She had to know what was going on. It was the same sense of urgency felt around the country and in parts of the world. There she was skipping class for the first time ever, watching the day's tragic events unfold each hour, joined by more and more students who watched the horror. She saw the second plane crash, then before her she witnessed, first slowly, then faster and faster, the collapse of the towers. Not a scene from a TV show, not a scene from a movie. What was this? It was something most Americans didn't remember in their lifetimes, a terrorist attack on American soil, a day that had an evil faction using surprise as their strategy to take as many lives as possible. People, not just Americans, but from different parts of the world, lost their lives. Then the world watched as the heroic efforts began when the first responders, the Good Samaritans, instantly jumped into action and some of their lives were lost. For the scene continued to unfold. It had a deep, scarring effect. We stand here to honor those who lost their lives, those whose families' loved ones were ripped away from them that morning with no warning. Dr. Louise Cadillo in Bolton and her family lost her brother on that morning. Buildings collapsed, an iconic city was under siege, a massive government military building was targeted, a quiet Pennsylvania farm field that was not part of the cruel plan was reeling from the crash. We were a nation thrust into grief. I want to thank my daughter Maggie for letting me tell you of her personal experience on that tragic morning. We could count the lives one by one, but people couldn't fathom the sights and events as they unfolded for that morning and for years to come. So I look over at you now and ask the question, is it right that we should continue the 9/11 remembrance each year so we do not forget? It was before your lifetimes, we understand. But I'd like to say that the answer for us here today should be yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. In America at present, there are many issues that divide us. However, there are even more issues that unite us all, such as the love of our country and the belief in the goodness in the vast majority of our fellow citizens. To help us remember our shared love of this land, would the students of the Bolton High School Choir please come forward and lead us in singing the first verse of America the Beautiful. For those that can, would you please rise?
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Our next speaker this morning is Senator Steve Cassano. Steve was a professor at Manchester Community College for almost 30 years before retiring. In addition to his successful career as an educator, he also has a long track record in public service. He served on the board of directors in Manchester starting in 1977 for 14 years. He then served as mayor of Manchester for an additional 13 years. In 2010, he was elected to the state Senate, and for the past 12 years has been representing the interests of Bolton, Glastonbury, Manchester, and Andover at our state legislature. As senator, he has found the time, despite his busy schedule, to attend the 9/11 events at Bolton Firehouse every year. All this adds up to an impressive track record of over 45 years of dedicated service. Jim, please. Senator Cassano, could you please come forward? The senator has decided to retire from the Senate anyway. Don't know what's going to happen in the future there. But because of his dedication, and I knock on his door every year and he opens the door and says yes, I don't even get to talk, okay? But Senator, I'd like to present you with a plaque today. Jim, could you read that, please?
Presented to Senator Steve Cassano, in recognition of your many years of outstanding commitment and dedication to the Bolton 9/11 ceremony program. Bolton Volunteer Fire Department, Bolton, Connecticut, presented September 11th, 2022.
This has a picture of the Twin Towers on it because he's so instrumental in our ceremonies, but also has a picture of him in front of a Bolton fire truck on the plaque too. So thank you very much. Yes, sir. I yield the podium to you, sir.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Bolton, for such a gracious award. This is a very significant day. And unfortunately, most of America just doesn't see it the way that people in this room see it. There's USA and there's small town USA. And what I love most about Bolton is that Bolton is here. Bolton understands how important this day is. I was at a ceremony earlier today in Manchester, a ceremony that they've done every year at the fire station. Without the efforts of the fire department and others, there probably wouldn't be a ceremony, and in most places across the state, there probably aren't ceremonies anymore. Small town USA. I lived in Boston as a kid. Depending on where my father worked, it was Provincetown, it was Nantucket. It was always on the shore because my grandfather was a fisherman, my father became a fisherman. But I always lived in a small town, or most of the time lived in a small town. And I can't tell you how much I miss that. And that's why I have a special love for Bolton. My grandson, my daughter's here, my grandson's in school here. It's the way things should be. And more important for the larger communities and so on, I feel bad for them because they don't have what you have. You wake up every day and you take it for granted. I live in Bolton, it's great. It's hard to understand it because if you're not used to that, or if you've lived somewhere else in a larger community, a more impersonal community, you feel that difference. 911, Bolton lost one of its own. As a result of that, I met her niece, or I think it was her niece, Allie. Allie became very, very close to me. She was an incredible woman, a driver. I am going to join the service. I'm going to do that on behalf of my uncle. Not only did she do that, I think she's a helicopter fighter pilot at this time, and she's this tall. I don't think I have ever been more impressed by an individual person in my entire life than this woman, the drive of this woman. It's easy to make a promise. It's easy to say, I'm going to do such and such. She is a role model for all of us. It's unfortunate that it took a 911 to motivate. And I mean that. I don't know what Allie would have done without a 911, but I can assure you she wasn't going to sit back. She was going to do what's good for Bolton, what's good for family, and so on. That's sometimes the best thing about a tragedy. In a tragedy, sometimes we become one. We work as one. We work as a united team. We wake up. We wake up and we smell the roses. It's as simple as that. And as long as we continue to do that, we're going to have a better America. As long as we have small towns, it will happen. It will happen because we know each other. We communicate with each other. Our kids do. We have a trust within each other. I hope that never changes. Thank you, Bolton.
One little tidbit of trivia. The Cadulo family, they have both doctors, husband and wife, 3 daughters, grew up and raised in Bolton. They're now all out. The grandfather was a captain in New York City Fire Department. He retired. He moved here to be near his daughter. His son was also a captain in the New York City Fire Department. September 11th, 2001 was his birthday. He had a day off from work. When the emergency started to happen, he said, I have to go to work. I have to support the men. He died in the towers. Allie, not only she Army, she's a West Point graduate. And if you want to go into aviation in the Army from West Point, you've got to be in the top 5% of your class. And great success story, and Bolton Fire Department has many ties to the Cadulo family. Our final speaker today is Bolton Fire Department Chief Bruce Dixon. Bruce is a man who has dedicated his entire adult life to serving his community in the volunteer fire service. He grew up in Bolton and originally joined the fire department in high school in 1971. Early in his career, he moved to several neighboring towns, staying active as a firefighter and community volunteer. He and his wife, Bernice, eventually returned to Bolton, and Bruce became an officer and a leader in the fire department. That's a total of 51 years of service. Since 2013, he's been the chief of Bolton's fire department. He's also a member and past president of the Connecticut Fire Chiefs Association, and he serves on the board of directors of the Eastern Connecticut Fire School. Bruce is a consummate professional and a great leader that works long hours every week, year after year, to make sure the Bolton Fire Department is the best it can be. Chief Dixon, would you please come forward and lead us in your part of the program and the ringing of the bells?
Just to deviate a little bit, back in 2012, I look around the room today. Back in 2012, I was asked to do the 9/11 ceremony for the town of Bolton. And myself and a fire marshal at that time, he and I said, we'll take on a challenge, and we went up to the gazebo at the center of town. I think there were 7 or 8 people sitting in attendance at the gazebo. In fact, there's a little flyer I did, so I remember the date, 2012. And we did a ringing of the bell, which I'll do at the end of the ceremony here. That was a ceremony. Look around you today. The question was, do we continue this? I guess we do. A number of people interested, very interested in this. Today we gather to acknowledge the 21st anniversary of the attacks, September 11th, 2001. This day is our Patriot Day and National Day of Service and Remembrance. Excuse me. There are many changes that we have seen over the last few years. Last year, we attended this ceremony in masks, all due to the ongoing pandemic. The year before, September 2020, with COVID impacting our nation very hard with much sickness and unfortunately some deaths, a group of us still held this ceremony virtually with the assistance of the Community Voice Channel. To the point of 6 or 7 people on a green, 93 people watched that video on CBC, so I guess it's important. This year, COVID is still present, but in most cases, it is less of an impact, less of an effect on people due to the vaccines and our awareness of public health. There were 2 museums noted the history of September 11th, 2001. The New York 9/11 Tribute Museum closed its physical location in Manhattan this past Wednesday, citing great financial losses during the pandemic. The majority of the museum's artifacts, videos, and other items will be moved to New York State Museum in Albany. The 9/11 Memorial and Museum is an annual commemoration ceremony place. Family members of 9/11 victims once again gather at the Memorial Plaza this morning to read aloud the names of those killed in the 9/11 attack and in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Ground Zero is no longer a place of terror, but a memorial and a place for quiet reflection. Where the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center stood, the 9/11 Memorial now stands tall as a sign of freedom to the world. The World Trade Center, Twin Towers, each consisted of 110 floors, and 2,071 steps. And each year, thousands of people, so noted earlier, thank you very much, you must have read this. Each year, thousands of people walk, climb, and run up the stairs to remember. Firefighters in full protective gear, police, military, bomb squad personnel march steadily alongside civilians of varying ages, abilities, and backgrounds. In over 46 cities, there are stair climbs this year, in addition to many 911 hero runs throughout the country, as noted in Avon this morning. We will never forget. Where were you on September 11th? I was up to go along with Jim's very nice greeting for me this morning. I was up in Albany, New York area, just drove into a fire manufacturer's facility up there to meet with the engineers to build a new rescue truck for another fire department I was in, Talon Fire Department. And they said, hey, you're a pilot. I said, yep, come look and watch what's happening on TV. We finished the engineering study on the truck, but we watched TV all day long, so something you don't forget. You don't forget. Some other things that are not forgotten. Some dates to remember. And it's not, a lot of people lost their lives that day and after, okay, because of the terrorist attack, but an awful lot happened after that because of that terrorist attack. Before and after, dates to remember. Vietnam Veterans Day is March 29th. We remember 9 million American service members answered the call of duty between 1955 and 1975. 31 years ago, seems a long time ago, 31 years ago since Operation Desert Storm. 32 years ago, the start of the Gulf War. This is 72nd anniversary of the Korean War. Listen to this, students. That began after 5 years of tension in the area. 77 years since the Battle of Iwo Jima. And for some that, I don't think anybody remembers that here. Bob, no. 161 years since the Civil War. That's a joke with a gentleman. It's a joke with a gentleman. He can take the joke. I don't remember that. Very interesting enough, every day at 5 p.m., taps are played. Our national song of remembrance. They're played at the World War I Memorial in Washington, D.C. every day. It's the 101st anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. Some birthdays to remember, and if individuals in the room want to stand up for their service, it'd be appreciated. It's the 386th birthday of the U.S. National Coast Guard. Any Coast Guard members here? Or excuse me, National Guard, National Guard. I'm coming to you in a second. In 1775, 247 years ago, the U.S. Navy started. Any Navy veterans? U.S. Army, 247 years. There's a few gentlemen. Right? Please keep standing. Please keep standing, if you would. Please keep standing. The U.S. Marine Corps, 247 years, 1775. U.S. Coast Guard, 232 years ago. The gentleman in the back. And because it wasn't started early, because they didn't know how to build planes, the U.S. Air Force in 75 years ago. There we go. Thank you very much for your service. Thank you. With all these conflicts, whether it be 9/11 or the number that I just talked about, and a gentleman spoke about earlier today, PSTD Awareness Month is in June. As we remember 9/11/2001, the lessons that were learned, what else happened around the world this year that have very troubling feelings? Ukraine, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Taiwan, China, Iran, Yemen, Israel, Palestine, Haiti, Myanmar, and Africa. Conflicts all around the world going on right now. With that, I'd like to do the bell ceremony, as we've done every year. In the past, Deputy Chief Peter Moore assists me for that. The men and women of today's fire service are confronted with a very dangerous work environment than ever before. We are forced to continually change our strategies and tactics to accomplish our tasks. Our methods may change, but our goals remain the same as they were in the past: to save lives, protect property, sometimes at a terrible cost. This is what we do. This is our chosen profession. This is the tradition of a firefighter. So, I had a tough year. Tough year this past year. The fire service of today is ever-changing, but it's stepped in tradition 200 years old. One such tradition is the sound of the bell. In the past, as firefighters began their tour of duty, it was the bell that signaled the beginning of the day's shift. Throughout the day and night, each alarm is sounded by a bell, which summons those brave souls to fight fires. I'm sorry. Which summoned the brave souls to fight fires and place their lives in jeopardy for the good of their fellow citizens. And when the fire's out and the alarm has gone to the end, it was a bell that signaled to all the completion of that call. When a firefighter has died in the line of duty, paying the supreme sacrifice, it was a mournful toll of the bell that solemnly announced the comrade's passing. We utilize these traditions as symbols which reflect honor and respect on those who have given so much and who have served so well. To symbolize the devotion of these brave souls had for their duty a special signal of 3 rings 3 times represents the end of the comrade's duty and that they will be returning to quarters. And to the 343 firefighters who have selflessly given their lives for the good of their fellow man, and for the hundreds of others that have passed away from complications resulting from September 11th, 2001, their task completed, their duties well done. To our comrades, their last bell, they have gone home. If you can, I ask you to please stand with us at this time and never forget with the ringing of the Norman Price Memorial Bell. Debbie. Thank you very much.
I'd ask that the students from the choir please come up front again. We're going to be concluding our program by singing the national anthem. After that's done, the program's officially over, and I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come to this event today.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.